You are now listening to the Take a Charge podcast, hosted by Aaron and Adam McCoy. In the house that Lukas, Adam, and Aaron built, we're back with, is this episode 7? Adam, I'm going to kick it over to you to introduce our guest for today. He's one of your good friends. He's one of my friends. We've known him for a long time from school, high school, and before that. So I'll let you introduce him.
Yeah, joining us today is Lukas Paul Moreland, one of the fellow graduates of the MVCA class of 2016 and a recent graduate of The Ohio State University. Lukas and I spent many a day, many an evening here at MVCA where we are recording this podcast, both on the fields outside at Short Park, certainly not the ones that are as nice as this one with the soccer match. Yeah, they have upgraded. But also with band and with different things that we would put on for theater here at MVCA. And then Lukas also played basketball for a time, had those middle school memories.
Short time.
With Moreland's Muskrats and Reed's Raccoons, the two teams in practice. That was always fun. But we are happy to have him join us today and happy to hear his thoughts on all things going on in his life, all things throwing it back a little bit as we did with our previous guest, Brad Grosjean, for MVCA memories, and hearing his thoughts on J.J. Watt and the developments there as well, as Lukas is probably one of the biggest J.J. Watt fans that I know. So, Lukas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Right now I'm working for a contractor up in Columbus. We do residential remodeling, mainly kitchens and bathrooms, stuff like that. I do most of the electrical work for that. Meanwhile, I've been applying to different engineering jobs, a couple different companies here and there, and just kind of waiting for things to open up again. You know, I usually do a lot of sound gigs. This time of year, as it's starting to get warmer, gigs start to open up, doing festivals and things like that. But right now, there's still not much of anything. I've started to have a couple, which has been fun. A couple churches that are doing stuff again.
Yeah, and you did a lot of that kind of audio work for Crew in college, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so which Crew at Ohio State is really big.
Mm-hmm.
We had our weekly meetings were usually around 500 people when I was in there. And so I would do sound every week for that. And then I also did sound regionally for Crew. So there's a team out of Indianapolis called the Performing Artists Team who does, like, their whole ministry is bringing people to Christ through music, whether that's worship music or secular music. Like a few years ago, they actually went to Poland and did a secular American music tour through Poland, but they were like really specific with the message of all the songs that they chose. And they were able to use that tour as an in through Poland to be able to share the gospel. So I've done some gigs for them, never did one of their international tours, but did a bunch of stuff for them. You might be familiar with Winter Conference in Indy.
Yep.
I've helped out with that a few times as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've heard of different clubs, like the Glee Club at Miami will frequently do the international tours like that. And I know our friend Joseph Ivan has gotten to partake in that and go to some pretty cool places, but that's a whole nother thing entirely to be able to spread the gospel through that and to be able to do that through Crew. So yeah, I'm glad you've had that positive experience with them. And for those of you who don't know, Lukas is quite the entrepreneur. In high school and even probably before that, started his own business, the first of which being the Neighborhood Mower, which was focused on not just mowing lawns, but also repairing lawnmowers. And then On Cue Audio was the other one, which I'm sure spurred your interest in being able to do those sorts of things for Crew. And then now that you're out of college looking for other gigs as well. So what spurred you? I don't think we've ever talked about what spurred that entrepreneurial spirit in you at such a young age.
I don't know if I ever told you the story of the first thing, like the first mower I ever fixed was actually Amy Gills, who was our AP Calc and physics teacher. She lived in my neighborhood when we grew up, and we were family friends with her even before I had her, because my older sister Rachel had her, and she was her volleyball coach, stuff like that. And she had an old push mower that quit on her, and they just went out and bought a new one. And she said, "Hey, Lucas, you can have this. And you can do whatever you want with it." And so I fixed it up. I think I sold it for like $150. I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, I could, you know, a lot of mowers are actually pretty simple things to fix when people don't want to mess with it. So that's kind of what I started doing. I started looking around for people who were throwing lawnmowers away, or like put it out at the curb and say free or whatever. And just started fixing them and selling them, and started to make some money so I could get some other stuff. And that's where, and my dad just encouraged me, like, hey, you could make some good money for this. Like, why get a job at like a fast food joint or something like that if you can make money doing something you would actually enjoy doing and be your own boss? So my dad helped me out with some stuff, get me going, but just kind of expanded it from there, because I love mowing grass and just being outside. It's just always really fun. I just like equipment. I like machines, and that's kind of like fuels all of my interests, between like sound, cars, mowers, like anything. I just like stuff that moves. And
yeah, I think there's something empowering too about being able to fix something for yourself and not have to be burdened down by buying a new one. I think a lot of times people are scared to work on stuff that involves any sort of motor or electrical work as well. I'm certainly not as advanced as you are in anything, but I've enjoyed the times that I have been able to fix something myself on my car just by going to AutoZone and getting the part myself, or even my laptop that I had when we were in middle school that had been collecting dust in my room for the last 4 or 5 years since I went to college. I took apart on one of my off days in the fall and was able to rewire it to where the charging system worked again. And so I've been using that for all of my like personal Zoom calls and different things. So yeah, there's something definitely empowering about that. That's really cool.
We mentioned that you had graduated from OSU, and both of the guests that we've had on here so far have had connections to Ohio State. Brad, who obviously went to Ohio State, and then Christian, who's from Columbus. And we talked about with him, he worked the Miami versus OSU football game a couple years ago down on the field. Are there any specific OSU memories or OSU sports memories that stand out to you from your time there?
Well, probably like the biggest singular memory would be the Ohio State-Michigan game my freshman year, because that was the first time I had experienced that. And like I got up at like 2 a.m. because College Game Day was there, and I went and I stood in line, and it was like 10 degrees outside. Like I remember having layers and layers on, and it was just so freezing cold. But got on TV on College Game Day, and then went to the game, and that was the game. It was super close the whole game, and like went into overtime and all that stuff. And I was actually sitting in the northwest corner of the stadium, which is where that game-winning touchdown pass was caught. So it was like coming right at me, and it was just sweet. And we stormed the field and all that stuff. Like that was just such an amazing game and an amazing experience, like being my first Michigan game and all that stuff. But a lot of my favorite like athletic sports memories from OSU were being in athletic band. I did athletic band freshman and sophomore year at Ohio State, and getting to play at all of the hockey and volleyball games and stuff like that, getting to do script on ice, which if you're not familiar is the script Ohio, but on ice at a hockey game, which is just really, really fun.
That's really cool. Yeah, I had a chance to do ice band at one point when I was at Miami, and it's definitely a different experience. My only prior marching band, and I'm sure your only prior marching experience, was the 1 year when we were in middle school that we attempted to have a marching band, and then the kibosh was put on that because Coach Velardo wasn't a big fan of having people two-timing with football and marching band.
Well, attempted is definitely the key word. Like, I remember the one time we marched out on the field and tried to make an arc, but the problem was there were like 12 people in the band.
Mhm.
So we try and spread out and make an arc, and none of us can hear each other, and it's just terrible.
Yeah, we had our T-shirts, if I remember right, that were marching into history.
Yep.
And I always said we should have gotten one for the last game that was marching back out. But no, those are definitely some fun experiences. I had a chance to be involved in Miami's athletic band, and I don't know if you did any travel with them.
I never got to, which is a long, sour story. But I wasn't able to.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways I'm jealous of that because it led to a lot of makeup work. But I did get to go to the MAC tournament 2 times for Miami's men's and women's basketball teams. Thankfully, they at least made it to the second round and were able to go to Cleveland for 2 of those years, which I'm not the biggest Cleveland guy, but it was still fun to be able to get out of Oxford for a little bit and experience that playing in the band at what was at the time Quicken Loans Arena, is now Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse.
The R.
The R.
Since it was Quicken Loans Arena, it was the Q. And now since it's Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, no one calls it the R, but Adam and I just like to call it the R in place of the Q.
Yeah, we just tend to make fun of it a little bit. It does look nice, though. They've gotten a bit of glass paneling on the outside that was under construction the last time I was in Cleveland with Pep Band. But yeah, so you and I both were in band in high school. Even though it wasn't marching, we were both in the way MVCA's band was set up, for those of you listening, was we had a relatively small number of people for that as well, much like football. And so much like with football where you would play offense and defense for virtually the whole game, we played both concert and jazz band in the same concert, which isn't necessarily something that's typical. And I didn't realize that wasn't typical until I went and participated in an honors band at one point, and someone asked which one I did, and I said both.
Right.
The look of bewilderment.
Right. You get people from these schools that have 4 concert bands and a symphonic band, and they're like, oh, my band had 100 people in it. And I was like, mine was middle school through high school, and we had 30 on a good year. But I thought, we did a good job with 30 people.
Yeah, I remember when I was in 8th grade, and they had the combined middle school and high school band, and I don't think it was even 30 people. It might have been barely 20 people, but I think that was the last year that I had played in the band. But that was pretty fun for me, just because that was the only, technically the only class that I had with Adam was first period band, high school band class. So that was always pretty funny, waking up to blaring sounds of trumpets and trombones in the back of my ear, because the way the band was laid out, it went like the wind instruments, like the clarinets and flutes, and then saxophones mostly. We had a lot of saxophone players at the time, and then all the brass in the back. So that was always fun.
I think one of the cool things that was brought in by Mr. Carabella was the introduction of the trips that we were able to do. Initially Kings Island, which is what it is. It's close by, but it's still something. But then later on, when we got to go up to Cedar Point and really make an experience out of it, and competing at the schools that were up there in both band and choir, I think for me, one of my favorite memories was the year that we actually had a decent number of schools that we were competing against, which isn't always a guarantee for schools that are as small as we are. It was structured similarly to athletics, where you have different divisions. So we weren't going up against schools that had thousands and thousands of people. But for our size demographic, we beat out 4 or 5 different bands one of the years that we were up there. And that felt better to me than even any of the times that we had just gotten good ratings, because good ratings on their own are something, but to be able to actually compete and show your hard work in that way, that meant a lot, I feel like, for me.
Yeah, it was definitely. I love those trips. I mean, even you hear about other bands, people with big schools go to like New York City or Disney or something like that. But even though we didn't get to do something that big, going up to Cedar Point or even the Kings Island trips were just super fun to get away and really try and compete even at any level. I remember my senior year. That was when we stayed in the area, but I ended up winning Best Jazz Solo on trombone. And I remember listening back to because we got recordings of the judges like making comments as we were playing in the background. And I'm up there soloing. You just hear the guy, "Oh, wow, that's something. Wow, nice." And I'm just like, just going at it. Like I played the highest notes ever in that solo because it was like the last song in our last like we had done concert band first, I think. So it was like I was like, this is the last time I get to play in high school. Like I might as well just blow out my lips and just go for it. I remember my brother afterwards saying, "I didn't know a trombone could play that high." I was like, I didn't either.
That's awesome.
That was super fun. That was a great memory, and doing that scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
Around Cincinnati senior year.
You were part of my group for that scavenger hunt, right? I think with Mrs. Ivan.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember her losing a hubcap?
Yeah. We were going so hard trying to do this.
So unnecessarily too. Yeah. No, that was fun. One last thing on those band trips that I'm not sure if you remember, but the first one we went on was the year that Mr. Bouts was one of the assistant directors. And I'm trying to remember, he texted you something, or you texted him something about the pizza. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we were promised pizza to be sent to our rooms. We were staying in the Great Wolf Lodge. And it was a long day because we went and we did like the playing competition at whatever local high school. And then we were staying in the Great Wolf Lodge, and I was starving. And I don't remember how the conversation started, but I sent him like, "Bouts, where's the freaking pizza?" He says, "Keep your pants on. It's on its way."
It eventually did get there.
It did. Yeah. And that was when I could actually eat pizza still. Right now I'm gluten-free.
Oh.
So that sucks.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about the fine arts side of your MVCA experience. What about football? So you started playing, was it your junior year? And I remember, obviously, I went to all the games because Adam was on the team. So what were some of your favorite memories of playing football here at MVCA?
Well, it's kind of a funny story how I started out playing. Because the coaches here had been trying to get me to play for as long as I can remember. I was always a big kid, and we needed bodies, honestly. So even if I wasn't good, they wanted me on the team. And I worked out with the football team, like I think was it middle school and freshman year or something like that, but never joined. And then junior year, I was considering it, and you guys had already gone through like all the two-a-days and everything like that. And I went to a scrimmage, and I was trying to decide. I was like, I think I want to play. Went to a scrimmage, watched David Pertell destroy his knee. I was like, yeah, I want to do this. And I showed up to practice the next day.
Wow.
To this day, I'm like, why? I saw the guy in my potential position get hurt horribly. And I was like, yeah, I'll play. That sounds good.
I think there's something to seeing people who are willing to do that and saying, there must be something to it. If you're willing to risk that kind of thing, there must be some sort of reward. And yeah, I'm a little jealous of you getting out of the two-a-days that we had that season, because those are never fun. I think that was also the season that I broke my hand.
Yes.
So
I remember your stupid cast.
Yes.
Digging up underneath my shoulder pads, pinching my skin underneath my shoulder pads. It was awful. It was always terrible. But it was funny you mentioned like jealous I got out of two-a-days. It was terrible because then I got heat stroke like the second week of practice because I was so out of shape. Yeah, I remember my dad telling me it was some practice and I was just starting to feel terrible, and we were doing I don't remember what drill we were running, but one of our coaches is like, what's wrong with you? And spins me around, grabs me by the face mask. And he just goes, get this kid out of here. He's going to keel over. And then my dad used to come to practice at that point.
Well, he was a coach at one point, too, for the younger kids, right?
Yep, exactly. And then when we were in high school, he would do all the stats and stuff. Mm-hmm. And was like the head ball boy when it was raining. But he rounds the bend in a short park and sees somebody laying on a bench with everybody crowded around. He's like, I hope that's not my son. And it was. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, you certainly came a long way from there to win, I think, some sort of recognition your senior year, right, on the line?
Yeah, I got a special mention for the All-State team and played in the Cincinnati East-West All-Divisions All-Star game senior year on the defensive line. That was really cool. And I mean, I was one of 2 guys on my team that wasn't playing in college. Like you had guys that were going to D1 schools on scholarship to play football that I was playing against.
Right.
And it was crazy. It was really fun.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about some of the practices too for that with the massive guys that were there.
Yeah, that's what was so crazy because we were a D7.
Right.
We were as small as it got. But playing against some of these guys that were from massive schools in the area, I mean, you had guys that were 350 pounds that could run a 40 in half the time that I could. Yeah. Like they were massive and fast. And I was just like,
what have I gotten myself into?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's one thing I'll be kind of disappointed for is I was supposed to play in the East-West All-Star game for the high school basketball last year for my senior year. And I think it was supposed to be sometime in April, and then the pandemic hit, and we kept saying, we're hoping to have it in May. We'll let you know. And we never ended up having it. But I mean, it was cool to be like listed for that event. I wish we could have had it happen. Yeah. But it was still cool to get that recognition. So Adam, what about you? What's one of your favorite football memories from playing here?
My favorite one, hands down, has to be our game against Summit our senior year. Lucas, you were obviously playing, Aaron, you were there as a ball boy, but we played pretty neck and neck against this team that was 2 divisions higher than us and has won state championships in the past. And, you know, they had more players on their bench alone than we had on our whole team, or maybe even in our whole class. I don't know. And we were neck and neck the whole way through. I think we were either up a couple points, down a couple points at halftime. And it came down to the last few possessions. And we scored to take the lead. We had been tied. We scored to take the lead. We missed the extra point. And something in me just thought, oh, that's going to come back to bite us. I just know it is. Mm-hmm. And we opted to go with our quicker prevent team defense in there for the following possession, which I was not a part of. I think we only went with like 3 men up on that one instead of 4 on the line. And Summit basically just passed straight down the field in like 4 plays and scored a touchdown. And they, of course, made their extra point. Their kicker had been booting it all day. He was good to go, had made a field goal. So they line up to kick off. This is with about like 30, maybe 45 seconds at this point. And they kick it off, and it goes straight out of bounds. I think they were trying to do like a pooch kick sort of thing. The guy had been kicking it into the end zone the whole time, but for some reason they opted to do that, and he kicked it straight out of bounds. So we got it at, I think, the 40 for that. We threw one pass to the side. It was complete for about 5 yards or so, goes out of bounds. We line up for the second play, and there's maybe 15 seconds to go at this point. And Branson drops back. Someone completely misses their block, and right before he gets decked, he chucks it. It gets picked off, ripped out of the defender's hands by James Heaton, and he runs for a touchdown.
Yeah, Summit was definitely my favorite game and one of my favorite memories thinking back, one of my favorite things to tell other people about, because it's like on paper we should not have won that game.
No.
And there was like so much crap talk going into it about us getting destroyed and all that kind of stuff. And we hosted them, right? Like,
we did at Turpin. Well, and the weird thing that I remember about Turpin's locker room setup is their field is up on a hill. The locker rooms are at the bottom of that hill.
Mhm.
The path for the fans and the players to get up to the field goes right past the locker rooms. And so we were, before the game, getting ready to go, getting stretched out and everything on the slab of concrete that was in front of the locker rooms. And you had all of the Summit parents who were walking up the hill, just like looking down their noses kind of at us like, oh my gosh, this team with like 16 players is really going to have a chance.
Yeah.
And we did.
We did. We won.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just amazing to think about like what we were able to do as a team. Because I think that year, especially, like a lot of us had played together for a long time. I was fairly new, but I thought like we had several seniors on the line, but also several freshmen and a lot of key points. But I thought we really came together. Your leadership at center, we had some amazing coaching that really helped us be a better team than on paper we ever should have been. And it was really cool to be a part of that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of credit goes to you too for being able to put as much work in as you did and improve to go from not having ever played to making the All-Star game your senior year is very commendable. But I agree with you. I think Aaron would tell you, we every year before football season starts, we have a tradition of going through and predicting the records for MVCA football and Miami football, just because we followed it for so long. And some of the years that I was playing when I was in high school, I was like, I hope that we go 10-0. I think there's a chance we might have a winning record. Realistically, I see us maybe winning 3 or 4 games. And then we come out and go like 8-2,
Yeah.
So and then I think we lost to the eventual state champions.
Exactly.
In the playoffs, which was a rough draw.
Of the playoffs, ended up losing to Fort Recovery, who were state champions that year. And we put the most points up against them than anyone else did in the tournament. So
yeah,
that was pat myself on the back here.
Yeah, for sure. They were an impressive team, to be sure. Had some of the best linemen that I've seen. But yeah, I think that's something you see now. You talk about the coaching and the mix of Aaron and I have talked about with NBA teams. One of the things that tend to separate the good from the great are those teams that have the mix of older and younger players, and even in March Madness too. And it's sad to see I think Caleb Geiger was the only senior on the football team this year.
Yep.
I think that's one thing they were missing. Obviously, you miss a lot by whoever replaces Coach Velardo, because I thought he was always able to get more out of his team than what people would expect. But I hope, like we said, we're sitting here in the cafeteria. There's a beautiful football field behind us. I hope they're able to get back to at least somewhere close to where they were when we played, and even for a couple years after the teams they had. I think they made the playoffs once after we left as well. But yeah, I'm hopeful that they'll be able to get back to that sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And I want to mention here too, what I loved most about playing football at this school was seeing, and also helping coach in years after I graduated from here, seeing Coach Velardo's heart for this program and heart for the young men that he was coaching. He said over and over and over again, after every game, like, the score that's up on that scoreboard is not what's important. What's important is who you are as young men, who you're going to be. And that's why he used football to shape us into being better men in the future, into being just better Christ-following men of strong character. And there's so many things in football that you can relate just in working through hard times. Because, like, football sucks. It's grueling. It's really fun, but it is really hard on your body, and like learning to be able to push through in those hard times is what makes a successful player. And that's what, like, this life is really difficult.
Mhm.
This life really sucks because we live in the fallen world.
Mhm.
You know, sin and evil is real.
Mhm.
And like, there are going to be really hard times, and it takes a real man of strong character to be able to push through hard times, not give up, lean on his brothers, and be able to make it through. And I think it's just, those are the lessons that were taught by Coach Velardo that I look back, and it's just, that's my favorite thing, really.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest testaments to that was probably our worst loss our senior year, which there were only two, but the worst of those two losses was a 40-ish point beat down to Fayetteville. And just a lot went wrong that game. It probably shouldn't have been that much of a blowout, but
that's a much longer story.
Yeah. It is. It was what it was. Recorded my only field goal block in that game, so that's one good thing, I guess. But even after being defeated so badly like that, Coach Velardo was so willing and still extended the invitation to pray with the other team after that game, and we did, which I think is such an amazing thing, especially with a public school, to be able to do that and to be humble in defeat. I think that's a big life lesson that you and I have taken from that, for sure.
Yeah, my football experience here at MVCA was probably a lot more limited than your guys' experience, but I mean, I got those same feelings, and I feel like it's bigger when you're younger, especially to build that foundation of what's going to be expected of you when you grow up, and how to be someone that's a kind of a light in the community. And so I played my 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 7th grade years. And my first year that I played quarterback and tight end, I think. And then 5th grade, I played the same thing. And then 7th grade, I backed up the starting quarterback, and I was left guard, I think. And I was never really that great at football. I enjoyed playing it at the time, but looking back on it, I wasn't that good. I enjoyed playing defense more than I did offense. I played outside linebacker and safety for most of the time that I played. But going into my 7th grade year, and I got put on the line. I mean, I was fine putting it on the line, but I was not that big of a kid, and compared to some of the other guys that we had on our team, I was definitely the smallest one on the line. But there was always older kids ahead of me, so I didn't really play quarterback that much. So when people tried to get me to play in high school, I was like, there's already guys above me. I don't really see myself playing quarterback, and I don't want to be on the line when we had just entered a new conference with people like Summit Country Day, who had kids that were way bigger than me. I'm not going to put on 100 pounds to beef up for the line when I'm still playing basketball and baseball. Like, that's not me. But anyway, I still see where you guys are coming from, and I definitely agree that the football program provided a good foundation for you guys and a lot of other of my friends and me when I played when I was younger.
Now, Lucas, shifting focus a bit from our own football playing days to some folks who are still playing football currently. As I mentioned, you are probably the biggest J.J. Watt fan I know. The news came out a couple of weeks ago now that J.J. Watt had requested to be released, was granted that request, and it was rumored that he was going to be heading to either Pittsburgh or Cleveland. Pittsburgh is where his two brothers play, I believe, so it would have been interesting family reunion there. But he broke from all of the predictions and announced that he was signing with the Arizona Cardinals.
So, first my reaction, I suppose, when I first heard the news from the Texans, and I was like, how could they do that? It's JJ Watt. Like, he is the Texans. Like, nobody else matters on that team. My own biased opinion, of course. Like, as I think more about it, like, it's probably time for a change for him. Like, he was such a dominant player when we were in high school. And then, he's been injured a few times now, and he just hasn't been JJ Watt in recent seasons. So I'm excited for the change. Like, I'm excited for him to get on another team, maybe a little different pace. Maybe we'll start to see him being a little bit more like himself, be a healthier player, and we'll just see. I know you know this. I don't know how many other people know this, but I used to watch JJ's highlight reels to pump myself up before our games. Like, a lot of people have like their pump up playlists. They got headphones on in the bus or whatever. They're using music. I just watch JJ Watt highlights, and that pumped me up. Like, that got me all riled up. He was so dominant in those years. The highlight reels were great. And you mentioned the jersey. I had asked for like 3 years in a row for a JJ Watt jersey for Christmas, because he was the only player I cared about in the NFL. Still true. And I just wanted his jersey. And I don't even know why, but it's just year after year, I just didn't get a jersey on Christmas. It would be like the one thing I asked for. And it's just like, no jersey under the tree. And finally, was it my freshman year at Ohio State? I think I finally received a jersey for Christmas, and I wore it like every Sunday that the Texans played that year. I wore it every time to where one of the guys, because we had our crew meetings on Sunday nights. Oh, okay. And one of the guys that was older than me but worked production just called me JJ because I always had JJ's jersey on.
What was your favorite JJ Watt quote?
You mess with me, you got problems. That's all I know.
Did you ever break that one out either in a team huddle or against the opposing line during a game?
I never in like a huddle or I did it several times when Adam could hear me, but only Adam could hear me.
You do it in practice frequently, though.
Yes.
Especially when one of the younger players was going against you and was maybe annoying you. I know we both had experiences with that. Yeah, that's funny, though, that I had forgotten you used to watch those highlights as the pump up. We had some interesting pump up playlists or pregame rituals.
That was the worst. Team. Sorry, the music before the games, before your football games and before your basketball games had to be the worst pregame music I've ever heard.
Playlist for like 6 years or something like that.
Yeah,
it was a mix of like Taylor Swift, various 2012 pop songs,
Ellie Goulding,
and Christian worship music.
Wasn't Back in Black there on there though? Like the one like, kind of cool song.
Yeah, I didn't mind as much the one or two Lecrae songs that were on there, but when you started getting to more obscure like Christian, like we had Toby Mac on there, which like is fine, I guess, if you're like, I don't know, I listened to Toby Mac when I was like in middle school and stuff, but just doesn't hit the same.
You remember I think it was middle school basketball when I actually played basketball.
Those Muskrats.
We'll use air quotes, played basketball. I don't remember what the name of the song is, but it's like the
Crazy Frog, right? Yeah.
That was always on there, and we're like, warming up, running around the gym before our game. I'm like, why is this playing? Why is this our pump up song?
We'd have, I think, my sophomore year, we were allowed to kind of pick our own warm-up music, but they were still really strict on it. But my freshman year, they had still been using the same warm-up music, and the worst one that I can remember that was playing like, well, I was warming up for a basketball game, was they started playing Get Your Head in the Game from High School Musical. And it was one of the games where like the opposing team was running late or something like that. And we're all stretching out or we're doing defensive slides down at the other end of the court. and some like Cincinnati public school that we're playing just walks into the gym and gives us the side eye stare going into the locker room as we're doing defensive slides to High School Musical.
Yeah,
that sounds like MVCA.
we had that. I remember another one we had in middle school was we had the Dougie and like the one that was Do the John Wall. I think like our cheerleaders at the time had put the playlist together and were like really restricted in what they could use, but still had to be something better than that, I would think. I was thinking more though along the lines of individual pregame routines. One that comes to mind is there was another player on our team who I think had a similar experience that we had with our what songs were allowed before our games from MVCA. His was more what songs were allowed before the games from his parents. And so his entire pregame playlist was comprised of Huey Lewis and the News, which is like
What?
Yeah, not pump music at all. So I'd just take one of his headphones at any given time and it would be like, don't need money, don't need fame. I'm like, why? How are you getting ready to play football listening to this?
Like, yeah.
Pumping up. One last thing before we wrap up here, Lucas, I wanted to remember with you, we talked about a little bit before we started today was our experience with theater, and particularly your debut role as Drake the Butler in the original MVCA production of Annie when we were, I think, either going into 3rd or 4th grade.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what grade that was. What we would do here at MVCA, we'd do summer drama camps. So it was for all the elementary kids and whatever grade it ended with. But yeah, that was my big moment. My only big moment on the stage for theater was being Drake the Butler in our production of Annie Jr. and beat you out for the spot for the part. Now, little did we know back then we would go on many years later to do Annie again as high school freshmen, and I would be in the pit and you would be Daddy Warbucks
with a shaved head too.
with the shaved head.
Yeah, well, one of the weirdest things with that was whenever I would go to wash my head, I guess.
Yeah.
At one point, I started thinking, well, I don't really need to use shampoo because there's no hair there. So what if I just use a washcloth with soap on it for that, like I do the rest of my body? And the washcloth would just get stuck on my head and like pull your scalp. So that didn't last too long. But
I've done the shaved head thing a few times, like where I go like a month where I'd actually like shave my head like every few days or whatever and just do the bald look, which it's hilarious if you've never shaved your head before to shave your head and then no one recognizes you. It's great.
Do you have to have the facial hair to do that though?
Yes. Yes, you have to have something going on if you're completely bald because otherwise it's not a good look.
You get the Bezos look.
But yeah, you go through stages of like when you like if you actually do like a real good razor shave, it's like that first day it's like super smooth and like almost like a little slippery. But then that first day where it just gets a little bit of stubble, like the next day it's like sandpaper. And like you go to put a beanie on because your head's cold and you can't get the beanie. So like the first night you put a beanie on and it slides right off your head because there's nothing to hold it on. Then the second day you can't get the beanie on because you've got sandpaper head and it just everything sticks to it.
Yeah, that was an experience. Yeah. Certainly the pit, having been in it a couple times myself and having, I think, played the opening song for Annie down in the pit.
Yep.
Definitely adds a lot to the production. So I was really glad when we got to start doing that at the Anderson Center.
I loved doing the pit orchestra because I had always like through high school I did sound for like everything. I was the only student who had any interest in AV stuff at the time. So I did sound for all of our plays and stuff like that. But then freshman year, we started doing a live pit orchestra. And that year, it was only me on trombone, Mrs. Ivan on piano, and Ryan Bouts on drum set. That was a whole pit, except for the overture. which you came down and played trumpet. But I remember there was one song that the song was actually written as like 4 measures, and you just repeat as many times. It's a scene change song.
Right.
It was like a train station or something like that. So like Ryan Bouts is doing his like drum set thing that sounds like a train chugging around. I had this like just da da da, da. And Mrs. Ivan had a train whistle that she was like tooting the train whistle. We played that for like 10 minutes one night because something horrible happened in the set change that we just played it over and over and over again. That's probably my favorite memory for me personally in theater. It's probably the funniest memory. My favorite show was our senior year in Fiddler on the Roof. Just such an awesome show. And Adam, you did such a spectacular job doing the part of Tevye. Jealous because that's my karaoke song is If I Were a Rich Man, but I'll never live up to you actually being Tevye.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It was a very special performance for me and for everyone. As you know, it was only a few months after our dad had passed, and just the way that provided an outlet for all of the emotions I was feeling at the time was such a healthy and cathartic thing, and can't say enough for how supportive everyone around me was, whether it was the administration that would give me tea every morning for my vocal cords, or whether it was you guys playing in the pit, or just any number of things that were so supportive at that time. I just really look back on that with fond memories and hope to at some point when vaccinations are high enough get back into theater in some capacity, as well as some form of band or orchestra.
Yeah.
I know, I'm sure you saw the messages from Mrs. Backus, our high school band director, about the potential to play with the seniors from this year in their final performance coming up in May and playing the closing song from Monsters University. Is that something that you're looking to attend?
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I like skimmed through the music. I need to practice because I really haven't played trombone in like a year and a half now. And I got my trombone out the other day for other reasons that I'm like trying to get back into shape.
Yeah.
And I did like a simplified version of my old warm-up routine for 10 minutes, and I was exhausted. I was completely dead, and it sounded horrible. And I was like, well, this is going to be a long get back period.
I think the last time I played was actually when I came over to your house.
Yes.
About a year and a half ago, I guess it was now. And we played some Christmas carols right after Thanksgiving. And the funniest thing for me is I have muscle memory for my warm-up. Same thing every time, has been the exact same warm-up since I was in middle school. And
oh man, I can hear it right now.
as I was starting the warm-up, you start singing the notes that I'm going to do as I'm doing the warm-up because it's been repeated. You've heard it that many times.
Which we hadn't played together at that point in a few years probably, right? Because we really hadn't played together since we graduated high school.
Right. Yeah, and we used to have a brass quartet with you, me, Elena Stenson, and Sam Hunkler that was called Elena Manger and the Stable Boys. And we played primarily around Christmas. And the name came from the fact that we were trying to rehearse Away in a Manger. And somehow Elena heard her name.
Right.
And I jokingly remarked, what, like Elena Manger? And I was like, hold on a second. And Elena Manger and the Stable Boys were born.
Yep. You remember was it our first gig at my church, the first time we went to play?
Parkside.
And, we went up, like we got our instruments up, played like the first note, baby started crying immediately, and we're all like, oh no.
Yeah, it only got better from there. I think we ended up playing a couple things for MVCA, a couple things for my church and your church, and one thing for Matthew Wilson's family at Joseph Beth. That was pretty fun. And some stuff in Newtown, but yeah, overall, that was a great experience. Certainly hope that we can get back to doing some of those theatrical things as COVID hopefully gets under control here this summer. Lukas, it has been a pleasure to have you on today. So glad to hear that things are going well currently with the contractor role, and wish you the best in your search for that full-time position that you've been looking for, along with the startup of some different gigs and different things that'll certainly come about, as you've said, have already started to come about, and look forward to joining you in May for that reprisal concert for our class.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Thank you guys for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find our episodes, and you can also find them and listen to them on Spotify. And just be sure to tune in for our next episode on Take a Charge.